Erin is Associate Director of Digital Arts and Humanities in the Institute for Arts and Humanities. She's also Digital Humanities Coordinator for the library. And she's just completing her PhD at the City University of New York in English and Interactive Technology. And I love this description of her dissertation. It examines student writing as a site of struggle where political and technical consciousness is forged. I really just love that. And she was instrumental in creating a social paper, which is a tool for, described as a tool for network and progress student writing and feedback across disciplines, semesters, and publics. And I read one of her papers about this. She has a paper, Why We Need Social Paper. And I'm just going to quote from some of this because I really like it a lot. It says, every year enough papers are written by American students to almost reach the moon. And if one considers student writing globally, that distance expands beyond imagination. I want you to picture this enormous chain of words stretching from Earth and into outer space. And then I want you to ask yourself, who is reading that writing? I want you to ask what we learn about the practical power of speech when we practice speaking to nobody. I don't think instructors are really nobody, but those are the only readers of most student writing. Student writing then is a waste product, a valueless byproduct in the process of and the production of literate citizens. A public must have a stable space for discourse to circulate over time. A public must allow for new members to join as the old fade away. A public must not die every semester, or in our case, quarter. Let us build a stable space for student writing to accrue dignity and circulate over time across disciplines, institutions, communities, and nations. Let students, not the ed tech industry, debate and determine the emerging design of the space which will carry their voice. In this way, let them reimagine for the full possibility of speech, for they are the world's most important public, and only they can write themselves into being. Erin directs this KNIT project, which is recently launched here at UCSD to provide a digital commons for UCSD community members to build websites, join groups, and network, which I think you'll mention some about today as she tells us about networks for us, by us. So, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And also, that's the first time one of my student papers has been quoted. And I wonder if that's because I put it on a platform which was built to allow student writing to circulate. So thank you for helping me prove my hypothesis. So it's a real honor to be here today and share my work with a group of students and researchers who are experts in the way that design influences our social practice, right? And who are committed to refining our designs to improve our experience or to attend to human needs. So what I'm going to share with you today is not simply research, but an invitation to use your expertise to help us think through how technical design influences the activity of a university. And what activities do I mean? Well, how does technical design influence the way that students, faculty, researchers, librarians interact with one another? How does technical design influence the way that those university members conceive of their work? And how does the design of the different digital technologies we use, the different networks that we use, how does that shape the way the university interacts or even influences the broader public? So in this talk, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this digital commons knit that we're developing on campus. And its design is really intended to open up possibilities for academic activity to become more collaborative, more cooperative, more self-aware, more self-directed, more publicly valuable, and, dare I say it, more pleasurable. And you might notice the image that's behind my title. This is an image of the San Diego Women's March, which I'm starting with not to talk about the San Diego Women's March, but because I want to challenge us to imagine how networks might transform our individual academic activity into a collective force that is as vibrant, as empowered, as locally engaged as the march of individuals that we see here. Now, of course, I encourage you to find your own image that will help you think about the exciting possibilities networks have for academic activity. Now, as we talk about this, though, I want you to keep a few things in mind. I want you to think about whether it matters who designs the networks that we use for all our different academic activities. Who designs the email systems we use, the learning management systems, the text editors, the version control systems, etc. And does it matter how the data that is generated on those platforms and tools, does it matter how that data is collected, used, analyzed, sold? Does it matter if you know about how that data is used or collected? Does it matter if you have access to that data? And finally, I want us to think about the dark side of networks, right? That stuff that we keep hearing about in the news, but sort of put to the side because we need to, search Google again. The dark side, or the creeping suspicion we have that maybe our tools don't really have our best interest in mind. How should that affect the way that we use digital technologies in an intellectual environment? So these are questions to keep in mind, and we'll return to them later. But let's get to the subject at hand, the network transformation in the university. Now, I've started this talk with the idea of, let's think about how networks could transform the university. But of course, we all know that networks already have transformed the university, and quite visibly so, right, in the past 15, 20 years, and also maybe less visibly for at least the past 50 years, right? The ways that books circulate across libraries, different institutions, right? That's network technology, even though it might not seem as glamorous as social media or so forth. But we don't have time to talk about all these different network transformations. And so what I want to focus on is the way that recent network practices are shifting our cultural imagination of the goals and processes of higher education. And how so, you might ask? Well, let's think about the good old days when classrooms were blissfully free of smartphones and laptops, right? Education, for some folks, was conceived of as this process of taking expert knowledge from the professor and depositing it into the empty mind of the student. And in this view, it doesn't matter what's happening outside or who's president or what the ice caps are doing or things like that. It doesn't matter what's happening in the student's life or how they feel about the learning experience or whether that learning is connecting them to their peers or disconnecting them from their peers or connecting them to their city or disconnecting from their city. All that matters is that they are able to absorb that knowledge and repeat it back and get a grade. The educational philosopher Paulo Freire called this the banking model of education, right? Because students are treated like empty vessels to deposit knowledge in. And Freire claimed that this type of education is oppressive, right? Because it teaches students that knowledge is not something that needs to have something to do with their lives. The knowledge is something that's created by other people that they just must simply absorb. And it trains students to become more interested in their grades than developing their ability to critically understand and influence the real world that is right around them. And we hear a similar critique when people call the university the ivory tower, right? We hear in that description that academic knowledge, it's not connected to real life, it's in this protected space for scholars, it's only serving them. Well, Paulo Freire said, no, that is not what knowledge is. Knowledge is not something that is produced without care for the real world. And knowledge is not something created by experts to be poured into passive students. Knowledge is something that we create together to critically understand our world and to transform it for our own needs and interests. And if knowledge isn't helping communities become more empowered, then it's not knowledge, it's oppression. And don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that expert knowledge isn't important. Of course it is, but it must always be considered in the context of the learning community and what they can do with it. So Freire was writing about this in the 1970s, right? Long before Twitter and Facebook and Google and all these things. And he helped inspire a movement called critical pedagogy, in which educators encourage students to use the classroom as a space to investigate issues that mattered to them, but using the materials that they were studying, right? So if the class is on health, go investigate campus food options, evaluate them according to nutrition research, and for your final project, write a report to campus governance about recommendations for food options on campus. If it's a political science course, have students actually develop the course policy and participate in the grading of other students. If it's a class on information systems, have students submit a proposal for the redesign of the library based on emerging communication and technology practices, right? So you get the idea. Every learning activity is an opportunity to attempt to change things for the better, even if it's in a small way. And at the end of a course, students have not only learned something, right, but their labor of learning has contributed to the community in some way, and perhaps even helped strengthen their connection to the community. Now, even if you haven't heard of Freire, I don't expect these ideas to be, that strange to you, right? I don't think anyone in this room, whether you're a student or a faculty member or a researcher, actually thinks that education is about depositing perfect knowledge into the zombie student minds, right? No one actually thinks that. And I also know that there's a lot of exciting class projects happening on campus where students are involved in collectively producing knowledge, and often in ways that serve broader communities. For example, is this familiar to anyone? This is an exhibition up right now in the library by the fall 2017 communication course of Professor Brian Goldfarb. For one of their projects, they had to create proposals for monuments for UCSD. And so groups worked together, they created these awesome posters, and there's a bunch of them up on the walls. You should definitely go check it out. And they're proposing monuments based on their own experience. Okay, so we know, right, we don't all think that knowledge is this zombie process. But nonetheless, what I want to point out is that we've inherited tools, systems, practices, habits, and assumptions in which the banking model of education persists, right? These cultural attitudes hang on in the very design of our institutions, right? Think of the test, for example. Does a test serve any other purpose than to demonstrate that the student has absorbed this expert knowledge? Maybe it does. Maybe there are other purposes for the test. Like, don't go to your professors and say, Erin said that tests are oppressive. I don't know, try that. But let me know how it works out. But I still think it's worth thinking about, right? It's worth re-examining all these different aspects of our educational process, because digital networks are opening up new possibilities to transform the private labor of learning into something that is much more socially powerful and much more socially useful, okay? Now, you guys are probably familiar with online education because the Design Lab is doing awesome stuff with it, right? Here's Scott Clemmer doing one of his modules for a new course on design. We've had MOOCs for the past 15, 20 years. A recent statistic, or at least from 2016, says 58 million students have been involved in online education. And this is really awesome. This is interesting. It's taking an activity that's usually closed to the university community, it's opening it up to the broader public. There's, of course, a lot of issues about this, but just this idea that we're opening up things that are happening in the university to the broader public. Well, I want to think about that not just with teaching, but with the labor of students, what you guys are already spending 8, 10, 12, 20 hours a day doing anyway, right? How can we use networks to make that more of a powerful force in the world? So I'm going to tell you about a few examples to sort of get our imagination going. The first thing I want to talk about is the way that courses, undergraduate courses right now, there's a trend where professors and their students are working on publishing digital books. That's their final project, right? It's not a paper to be read by just the instructor, but a book for the whole world to read. And here's an example of one that I think is really great. It was taught by Lawrence Hanley at SF State University. Their course produced a book called Uber and Transmission. They used all the materials of their course to critique Uber and the share economy. And they also used science fiction to talk about these different issues. And it's really great, right? I mean, what would have been read by no one is now this resource for other students. Another example, professors are working with their undergraduate students to produce textbooks. I think this is really, really cool. Robin De Rosa, right? She says, students are the perfect people to help create textbooks since they are the most keenly tuned in to what other students will need in order to engage with the material in meaningful ways. I'm curious, has anyone here helped produce a textbook? Yes, 2, 3, 4. That's awesome. Okay, great. That's really cool. Does anyone want to comment on the experience? Was it awesome? Oh, we got a so-so over there. And here's just proof that it wasn't just one person or 4 people. There's guides to producing these. These aren't exclusively undergraduate projects, right? Here's one that's open source, collaborative logic text. Lots of people are producing these. Okay, another trend. We're seeing a lot of projects that involve undergraduate, graduate students that are about creating archives, that are documenting the histories of communities that have not yet been documented, or maybe not sufficiently documented. So UC Irvine has the V8 Stories Oral History Project, in which students are going out into their community, interviewing community members about their experiences and putting those oral histories up online in a public archive. And just some other examples of this, there's a similar, it's not an oral history project, it's a public history project about the founding years of American military occupation in Okinawa, but students are actually going to Okinawa and interviewing people there to talk about all these photos and materials that they have and posting that up online. The University of Washington has this really cool public history project on Women Who Rock, an oral history project on different women who were participating in the music scene there. The Black Liberation 1969 archive at Swarthmore College. And then an example here, right at UC San Diego, the Tell Us How You See It, a living archive, which is trying to document student experience, and students are submitting materials, and that's online also. So, right, another example of how students are helping co-produce knowledge that serves broader publics. A lot of students also are creating podcasts. Here's some examples, a lot of history podcasts, mostly graduate students, but some undergraduate students. Has anyone here done a podcast for a class, for course credit? Yes, one. And how was it? Woo! What was it on, by the way?
It was for optic nerve program.
Oh, cool. And did many people listen to it? Was there any?
It was used as some sort of like an assistance to a course that was taught there.
Oh, cool. Awesome. That's really great. Okay. And then, of course, I think a lot of people are aware of this, right? There's been a big sort of campaign to get Wikipedia in the classroom, to have professors or instructors assign their students to contribute to Wikipedia, right? And they've been keeping track of what the students have done. And so far, they've contributed 24.4 million words to Wikipedia. And that's pretty interesting to look into. Again, SF State University, not only did Lawrence Hanley have his students contribute to Wikipedia, but then he said, you have to write a digital book about the experience. So here are some examples of that. And it's really cool because he's not telling the students to love Wikipedia. He's not telling them to just accept it. He says, what'd you think about it? What were the good things? What were the bad things? And you can read the reflections. And one student said, I've been taught all my life that Wikipedia is not something we use in formal learning settings, but now I'm being assigned it, and it's actually really rewarding, and it's the only assignment that I've actually looked back at after I've finished it. Right? I mean, how often do you do that? And then he says, everyone says you can't trust Wikipedia, but then those same people are looking at it all the time. So, it's great to say, oh yeah, I wrote that, so there. Another thing you see on these reflections is not just, the excitement of being able to collaborate with classmates and strangers, but the sense that if other people see that I'm doing this, that I'm putting my knowledge out there, maybe they'll also do that, right? And you see people starting to imagine, like, whoa, wait, this could be really cool. Like, if everyone in this room, started a wiki page on, the Design at Large series, like, what would that be? What would we see there? Okay, another example, people aren't just contributing to Wikipedia, they're just taking their assignments and throwing them up online. Gregory Donovan, a PhD graduate at the CUNY Graduate Center, put up his dissertation. That was really great, because then I got to read it, and you know what, it's a pretty cool dissertation. Some students are even actually designing the syllabus of their course. And Kathy Davidson, who's a big proponent of this, says, in the decade of giving over some part of my course design to students, at every level, at every kind of institution, students have never failed to make the course better, deeper, more challenging, and more meaningful by their own engagement with the fundamentals of designing their own learning. So I'm curious, has anyone here contributed to the syllabus of a class in which they were in? Do you want to tell us about that? I know, it's like, even with networks, syllabi are too boring, right? We can't talk about them. And then just a few more things to talk about. Right, another way networks are changing, not necessarily student production, but academic production, is networking drafts of writing. That is something that I'm very interested in. I won't talk about it here too much unless you want me to, but this is Kathleen Fitzpatrick. She's a scholar of English, and she put up the entire draft of her scholarly monograph up online for the public to review. I mean, this is sort of unheard of, at least before 2009, I think, when she did it. Is there a date? Yeah, 2009. And we're seeing the use of Facebook and Twitter and things like that in the classroom, and of course GitHub. I imagine, are a lot of you using GitHub in the classroom? Is that, yeah, pretty? Mm-hmm. Hypothesis, folks familiar with Hypothesis? We're seeing a lot of classes sort of have their students annotate texts collaboratively, right? So this is collaborative knowledge production. What about Slack? Has anyone used Slack in a course? Yeah, so I was in this interesting experiment last summer where, how many of us were there? There were like 230 of us in a Slack channel from all over the world trying to, share research materials and talk to each other. Another sort of similar thing I was a part of, I'm just sharing these with you because I know about them, was this critical code studies working group that happened a few weeks ago. Again, a bunch of strangers get together in a forum and sort of, produce knowledge together. Books have come out of the critical code studies working group in the past several years of hosting them. Social media, of course. Do you ever like go onto Facebook or Twitter and ask people, a question for, when you're writing a paper or something, right? Yeah, we know about this. What about open UCSD notes? I just found out about this. Anyone know about this? Does anyone know Nima Moshiri? We got to find him. This guy has created a platform for UCSD students to exchange notes and other course materials, and I think it's faculty approved. I feel like I saw some positive remarks from faculty. So cool. Okay. So I think hopefully I've convinced you that networked research and learning can do provide all these positive benefits to our everyday practices. They can turn learning activities into a public resource. They can foster collaboration rather than isolation in the learning process. They can encourage students to address real-world issues and engage with broader publics. They can allow for more creative and pleasurable forms of intellectual production. And they can stimulate community building across disciplines, institutions, and communities. So this is all awesome, right? But remember those questions I was having us ask at the beginning of this talk, right? There's an entirely different side of networked digital technology, right? The dark side. So people will ask, like, that's great, but what about the dark side of networked technology? I mean, what about the fact that nearly every single one of these tools, are designed to extract personal data from users. I mean, that's just why they exist, right? From your phone, your television, from your phone to your television. Did you hear about this? Like commercials send out a little bleep that your phone hears, so then those devices are connected in your weird dark database profile somewhere. Your vacuum cleaner, right? Your smart home, Alexa, things like that, right? I mean, we're not even that shocked. We're like, yes, we know, okay. Tinder, of course. If you're going on Tinder, then you deserve it, right? I'm just kidding. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Uber, right? I mean, and even educational technology, right? I mean, student data is worth a lot of money these days, right? And so, okay, so what? They have our data, it doesn't matter, who cares? Like, that means I get free access to all these tools. Well, then the data, of course, allows for all these new forms of manipulation at a scale that, we've never really seen before, and a manipulation that's mainly carried out by, I guess, corporate America, if you want to call it that. But also, there are definitely other actors. But, right, so we all know about Facebook's infamous user mood experiment, right, where they manipulated the moods of users, right? And it turns out if you can manipulate the moods of users, you can probably sell things to them better. So let's make our users feel more insecure. You can delete files off of users' devices without them really knowing. You can slow down or damage property, right? You can damage the devices that are legally owned by people and not, and lie about it. Other scholars have brought up that these platforms are actually reinforcing racism, sexism, right? Sophia Noble's book is really anticipated. It's coming out this year, Algorithms of Oppression, right? And she's saying, look, algorithms are becoming powerful arbiters of our lives. They are, are they discriminating against you without you even knowing it? And now we have companies, right, that are pretty much proving that these technologies are addictive, right? Because this one is specifically designed, this company is saying we are going to really hone in on that addictive technology to make any app really desirable to click on. And of course, like one of the most visible issues that's come up in the last year is the ways these platforms, these networks, these tools are really threatening democratic processes, right? Even before the fake news scandal of the 2016 US elections, folks were saying like, these platforms could really sway an election, like easy peasy. And of course, now we're seeing that social bots are being, used to spread misinformation. This guy Aviv Ovadia, the chief technologist of the University of Michigan Center for Social Media Responsibility, he says, look, fake news is really the least of our worries. We're entering an age where it's going to be impossible to even tell what's real, right? He said, we are heading into the information apocalypse. And that's because the incentives that govern tech platforms are calibrated to reward information that is often misleading and polarizing, or both. Right? Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Google prioritize clicks, ads, and money over quality of information. And the information studies scholar Zeynep Tufekci, she says, yes, right, this problem, this is not a bug. This is a feature. These tools are designed to do this. So it's not just going to be an easy, technical problem, right? This is going to be an ongoing issue. And right, so in this world that we're looking at, a lot of people are mourning privacy, but I think really it's a lot more than privacy, right? It's the ability to know truth. It's the autonomy to make decisions based on knowing truth. And these are two things that if we don't have them, well, then we don't have democracy either. We really need those two things to be able to function in a democratic society. So regardless of where you place the blame or what you think can be done, you probably agree with a lot of people that something isn't quite right? Actually, maybe you agree with Tricia Stone, an arts lecturer here at UCSD, that something is wrong. And she has a show right now called Network Error at the Cal IT2 Gallery, which I encourage you to go check out. And because you're design folks, maybe you, like the author and activist Cory Doctorow, who was here on Friday giving a great talk as part of Tricia Stone's gallery show, maybe you, like Cory Doctorow, think, you know what, it's not technology in itself, it's not the machines in themselves, it's the people that are controlling them, right? So you're like, okay, technology isn't evil. But then maybe, like Zeynep Tufekci, you go, but it doesn't matter, because we're basically sleepwalking into this situation. We're sleepwalking into surveillance capitalism, which is evolving into data and computation-driven authoritarianism, one cool service at a time. What do you guys think of this tweet? Who agrees with it? Few people? Yeah, well, okay. Who doesn't? Who's like, no, this is just hype? One. Interesting. So who's like, I don't know, maybe? Yeah, right? It's a maybe. Yeah, wherever you fall on that scale, I think one of the problems is we can't really imagine what the alternative would be, right? It's either there isn't an alternative or it's too impossible, but what would the alternative to our current situation be? I mean, we can't just turn everything off. That's not going to happen. How would we get Valentine's dates on, just kidding. What I think is really important is that we really devote ourselves to finding what sort of alternatives have been offered, right? Maybe this year, but maybe stretching, right, way back. What experiments have happened? What visions, right? And I'm just going to go over a few little things that I know about, but I think, you could probably tell me a lot more since you are in the design world. But right in the 1960s, we saw, experimentation with what was called cooperative design, later called participatory design. There's been, I think, more exciting updates to this concept, like user-centered design. But right, this was the Scandinavian trade unions were advocating for the right of workers to co-design the information technologies in their workplace, right? Which 10 years ago, if you told me about this, I'd say, that sounds so boring, But this is actually a really radical idea right now. Alan Kay. 1968. He came up with this idea of a computer for students of all ages, and he called it the Dynabook. And you know what was really different about this Dynabook and the computers we have today, or the educational technology we have today? The students would get this computer like pretty much blank. They'd have to program it, the whole thing. Anything that worked on it, they would have to create it. So what does that mean? At the end of the day, that means that student knows everything that's going on in that machine, right? So you can't put little weird surveillance bugs in that machine. They would know. Not only that means they can, keep manipulating software to better meet their individual needs and interests. Then there's Ted Nelson. Who knows about Ted Nelson? Fun Ted Nelson. Look at this great book he wrote, 1974, Computer Lib, right? You can and must understand computers now. And Ted was furious. Ted opened up his manifesto and said, any nitwit can understand computers, and many do. Isn't that hilarious? That's hilarious to me, right? Unfortunately, due to historical circumstances, ridiculous historical circumstances, computers have been made a mystery to the most of the world. And he is just completely against this, right? He calls this the computer priesthood. He says the computer knowledge should not be this esoteric thing. The public needs to know how to work them, right? Otherwise, society is going to be controlled, by a clique of insiders. Interesting concern there. What about this guy? Who knows who this is? What student knows who this is?
That's Stallman, Richard.
Yes, Richard Stallman, the quirkiest maybe. This is Richard Stallman, who was pivotal in establishing the Free Software Foundation, which still exists today. It was established back in 1984, and they have advocated for something they call software freedoms. They have 4 of them right now. I'm going to tell you about them. First, freedom, or freedom 0, because they're nerdy. Well, you probably are too. The freedom to run the program as you wish for any purpose, right? So you should be able to do whatever you want with that tool. Whether, it doesn't matter who gave it to you, who made it, you should be able to do it. The freedom to study how that program works and change it so it does your computing as you wish. And to do that, you need access to the source code. So why would that matter today? Well, if I could study Facebook source code, I mean, not me personally, but if me and my, friends could study it, we could tell what it was doing. We wouldn't need to, debate over, Facebook walls. Like, did Facebook listen to you? Because I think I'm getting ads that are based on, wherever you went out to eat yesterday. This wouldn't be a mystery anymore. You would be able to know. And then once you found out that it was doing something creepy, you'd say, don't do that anymore. And then once you made that little patch, you would say, hey friends, I made this awesome patch to Facebook, can't listen to you anymore. You would have the freedom to redistribute that patch. And then there's this final one I won't get into really here, but it's just, they really want to ensure that all software that's made goes back out into the public domain. So that's another vision. Unlike Us is a movement that's really been trying to think about what they call a monopoly, a social media monopoly, and how we can create alternatives. Gregory Donovan, the graduate I showed you a little bit earlier, in 2011 started the Youth Design Research Collective, which was really cool, where he had a bunch of high schoolers create a really mini social network. But what was different about this network, besides the fact that there weren't 1 million people on it, and instead only 5, was that these students got to make all the decisions about security, privacy, how things showed up, right? And he found that at the end of that, they were really much more critical of digital technology in their everyday circumstances and had a lot more ideas about how we could, better develop these tools to serve our own concerns. The platform co-op movement, again, just another movement that thinks all our internet tools, we should really collectively own them and collectively govern them. If you can ever make it out to one of their conferences, I really encourage you to do so, because a lot of different cooperatives will come out and demo the tools that they're building. And one, for example, is a cooperative ride share, right? So instead of Uber, where the company makes all the decisions and the drivers often get cut out, they're working on a model where the drivers actually own that platform. Where are we on time? Okay. So all of these different examples, I think, are exploring how everyday users can have more understanding and control of the digital technologies that mediate their lives. And one thing that's come up recently is this idea that actually students are going to have a really important role in this, right? Chris Gilliard, an English professor in a kind of prominent education publication, said, what would the web look like if surveillance capitalism and information asymmetry and digital redlining were not at the root of what most students do online? We don't know. But if higher education is to save the web, we need to let students envision that something else is possible, and we need to enact those practices in the classroom. And so what I want to ask is, well, how can students help reclaim understanding and control of the digital technologies that mediate our lives? And this is where I want to suggest that what we need is a network of our own, right? A network that students can help imagine, that students can help develop, that students can govern, can grapple with all the problems that show up in those activities, and a network that grants us the perspective and the control that's usually only given to corporate entities or administrative entities, right? A network that grants us those Paulo Freire rights, right? To critically understand the structure and to transform it according to our needs. So this is the kind of reasoning and justification behind this digital commons that we've launched at UCSD, which is called KNIT, because we're trying to knit lots of people together. It's not the blockchain, folks. It's very simple. It's WordPress, which actually sends terror into many IT folks' minds when I tell them that. Right? It's WordPress technology. It's kind of simple, everyday folk technology. It's been around for a while. It also uses BuddyPress, which is what gives WordPress its social functionalities. Are you all familiar with WordPress? I'm assuming. Yeah, right. Just blogging software. So what can KNIT do? Well, the first thing to say is, what KNIT can do is it allows any member to create as many websites as they want. You could do that for a course blog. You could do that for this album that you're going to drop next week. But what's unique about ours is we are expanding it to institutions of higher education in San Diego. So right now it's UCSD and the San Diego Community College District. We're in the process of rolling it out to San Diego State University. We're hoping more folks will join us. It was launched with the support from a Mellon Foundation grant. That's really a collaborative project between the Community College District and UCSD. It's had support from the library. It's had support from Research IT. And it uses technology. It uses a sort of package of WordPress and other things called Commons in a Box, which was developed by academics at the CUNY Graduate Center, which is where I came to know it. So what does it do? I only have a little bit of time, so I just want to go over some of the functionalities. As I said, it allows you to create as many sites as you want. They can be public, they can be private, they can be collaborative with other folks. Right now, we're seeing a lot of sites for teaching, and a lot of those are private right now because I don't think there's a great comfort level about doing that in public, but maybe that will change. So when you go on and search sites, you might not see that many because a lot of them are private. We are about to launch a really exciting project that's directed by Luis Alvarez in the History Department and Yana Spiritu in the Ethnic Studies Department. They're doing something similar to a project I already showed you. They're doing a race and oral history project where they're having undergraduate students interview local community members about the history of race in San Diego, and then those students will be posting those interviews on KNIT, online, so that the community can benefit from those. And that project will live on over the years and hopefully grow. Here's just an example of a course using it, right, where students are posting reflections on the course blog. Another one, right? People have designed these in different ways. because WordPress allows you to customize things. Some students have done individual projects, right? This is an undergraduate student who, for his final project, decided to create a website, and that's really cool. It's a little information site about Peter Norman. Some research groups on campus have started to use it. So the Science Studies group has a blog, Disability Studies, individual graduate students post reflections. So Colin Burke, I think what he's doing is great. He's learning different Python procedures, or what do you call them? And he's posting his process up online so that other folks can learn from him, and then tweeting about it, and then people can follow his work. Another graduate student, this one in communication. I run a digital arts and humanities site. That's what I do over in the library, so people can find out about that. More blogs, you get the idea. The other thing it has is groups. Groups, it's basically, here's an example, the digital humanities group. You're all invited to join. Just go to NIT and log in and click on the digital humanities group. And it's just a place where we post information about events, resources, opportunities, etc. To share information. But anyone can start a group on anything. So, we're hoping it's a space where people can start making their academic activity more visible, finding like-minded folks, building community around different projects. And because this is spread out across different institutions in San Diego, these collaborations can span across the institutions. It's a place, right, you can network with members, you can find them. We have a little bit over, I think we have 1,040 members, and so we're excited to see that grow. I hope that number jumps tonight. So aside, though, from just providing these kind of low-key practical affordances of giving people a place to publish online and do these public-facing collaborative digital projects, we're really hoping to start having students imagine how they'd want to, how to design it better to suit your sorts of needs, and how to govern it, right? Because this tool's producing data. What should we do with it? Should we study it? I mean, maybe we could study our data for our own interests, see what sorts of trends we have across communication. Or maybe we decide, no, that data is sacred and no one should be able to look at it. Or maybe we say, let's cash in. Like, can we sell this? Like, let's make some money. At least we'll be the ones making money. And so I want to ask you, I want to end in a few minutes with a sort of collaborative exercise where we think about, what changes would we make to our digital technology? But before I do that, I just want to leave you with one thought. This banking model of education that Freire explains to us, right? I think it can be really useful for thinking about digital technology, right? Not just education, right? We can think about, is digital technology something that experts make, right? That then we have to just accept as it is, right? As empty vessels. Or, is digital technology something that we can all reimagine and recreate together? So that is how I want to leave you with a question. You have two choices. I want you to ask your neighbor, how they would choose some aspect, how they would change some aspect of their digital technology, whether it's, I want, the tools to stop, spying on me, or it'd be really cool, like in my case, I really wanted a network for students to share student writing. And the other thing you could ask about is how would you change just your academic activities, maybe even your homework, right? How would you change that to make it something that's more collaborative or publicly useful or personally meaningful? So turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself, and at least pretend to ask one of these things. And I'm going to give you like 2 minutes, and then I'm going to ask you to report back. Okay, before I lose everyone, did anyone have any interesting ideas come up? Yes.
My wonderful partner over here loves the idea of reprogramming our academic institution to be more functionally interdisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
In spite of all the rhetoric, as he would say, at the university for interdisciplinary activity at this university, it in practice doesn't exist in any meaningful way.
Interesting.
So trying to maybe remove some barriers and sort of kick out some old modes of doing things to allow for more real collaboration and maybe get some PIs, some more NSF funding since they do a lot of stuff.
I didn't mention that last part, but I'm sure that helps. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's great. That's awesome. Anyone else? Yes.
Maybe it's just leveraging existing programs like the NIT program to better fit with the course curriculums, because I do believe that some of the courses I've been taking, like Object 122 and PhD 100B, they have a lot of these group-based courses, and so having like a web-based platform and having that sort of like a safe space to share a lot of these ideas would be more beneficial to a lot more majors other than just design or cognitive science departments.
That's awesome. Okay. I would maybe I can get your email later and pick your brain about those courses. Thank you. Anyone else? Maybe one last question. You guys have been so wonderful staying with me.
We talked about sharing, being able to share our click streams with smaller groups.
Huh.
If we wanted to share, and we share them all with Google now, but if we wanted to share them with a class or just a small group,
Yeah.
So that we just do what we normally do, but we get the benefit of what other people are doing.
Yeah. That's really cool. Cool. Thank you. Well, folks, I don't want to. Was there another one? No? Yeah?
Just wanted to comment that everything you've shown me seems very PC-centric, whereas the next billion people are only going to have these and never touch a PC or even know what one is.
That's a really good point. So we need to be thinking more about mobile devices and
WordPress is still a very priesthoody kind of tool.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me give you an example.
Yes.
So actually, there's a group of us trying to, what we call democratize design.
Uh-huh.
And so, in fact, this is highly relevant. Some of the early work happened in healthcare. People with diabetes who couldn't take care of themselves. And so they built their own artificial pancreas, basically, because they didn't have to worry about the Federal Drug Administration. They could do it themselves. And we're trying to see whether we could go off. Actually, one of the studies we're going to do is in Appalachia, eastern Kentucky, where people suffer from high cancer and high heart disease, but let them figure out what they need, instead of experts coming in and saying, here's what you need.
Right.
No, let them figure it out, because a lot of them are very clever at devising really clever little ways of remembering things. And suppose we change design, instead of we teach people how to go out and figure out what people need, and then we solve the problem for them and give it to them. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Why don't we simply mentor them and help give them the tools so they can do it themselves? And yeah, it doesn't always, it can be paper. It can be a way of remembering to take your medication. It can be a way of helping other people. It doesn't have to be software.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Well, I just want to finish with a thank you very much. And if you do have any questions or comments or interests, please feel free to contact me and check it out, nit.ucsd.edu. And again, thank you so much for having me.